Hello, everyone. Last session of the day. Who's awake? Everyone? Yeah? Okay, we good.
They said coffee, they should be good. All right.
Today, we are talking about becoming you, a glimpse into credential abuse. So what we want to go over is kind of what credential abuse is, just basic level, the workflow, the life cycle, and then, different detection and mitigation strategies and how we look at things from our perspective. And to make this a little more fun, we decided that I would play the attacker and Brent will play the good guy. So hopefully that'll put a good positive spin on it. We'll see how that goes. So just a little bit about us. My name is Sonia Burney. I work at Akamai. I am a developer at heart, always have been. I work on a lot of different front-end web development tools, and more recently into the cybersecurity space. Brent happened to kind of pull me in, and now I can't get enough of it.
Yeah, my name is Brent Maynard. I am a security, kind of all of the things at Akamai, obviously web-facing. I fought credential abuse for a Fortune 200 retailer for several years, and then I moved over to Akamai to kind of help perfect and figure out different solutions on how we can continue the fight against credential abuse.
All right, so what is credential abuse? Textbook definition, it's the automated injection of stolen username, password combinations, any form of credentials, and into any kind of device endpoint or entry point. Sorry. So any type of device endpoint or entry point. And this can range from any type of application. So most commonly we see web applications today, but mobile applications and native applications are currently on the rise. We're continuously seeing traffic grow every year, over every year. And we see statistics about this, all the time on a day-to-day basis. So mobile applications, web applications, and now also IoT devices. And those are increasingly seen on the market as well. Now, credential abuse is one of the most common and popular attacks that we see in the security realm today. And the idea is that, you can see it in the headlines. I mean, how many of us have heard about the Uber data breach or Yahoo, Uber, PayPal? I'm constantly checking my Twitter feed, and every time I check, I feel like I'm seeing something new about a data breach. And it's becoming increasingly popular. And maybe in the last 1 to 2 years. So did this problem just start in the last 1 to 2 years? And the answer is no. The reality is that we have seen this over the last 5 to 10 years. So then why haven't we seen headlines before this? Why are we only seeing it more recently? And there are a lot of different reasons. First of all, in the last 10 years, just think about how many technological advances we've made and how much we've developed our tools for monitoring or detection purposes and even mitigation. We are nowhere near where we were 10 years ago. So a lot of the attacks that we see today could have possibly just gone unnoticed. Attackers are getting more aggressive in how they target a site. All the headlines that we see today, you're seeing millions and billions of usernames and passwords being stolen or being abused. But maybe back then it wasn't as large of a subset. So that's kind of one of the main causes, or maybe companies didn't report this number. So as with Uber, where they kind of hid it for a while and we didn't really know about it until it made headlines. So there's a lot of different reasons for that. So question for you guys, how many of you guys have had an account compromised before? Maybe in the last 10 years. Yeah, I figured no one recently, with all the security vulnerabilities out there today. I'm sure we're all making it, especially everyone here at Black Hat, we're taking the proper protocols. So what enables this behavior? Password reuse. And when I was younger, I myself was guilty of this, using the same weak or strong password across many accounts. This is not a good thing because we are now doing everything online, from banking to health information to insurance, anything that involves credit card transactions or even attaching to our bank accounts. It's all online. So we need to be careful in terms of password reuse. Single factor authentication, that's another one. So the general population doesn't realize this, but a lot of what we see today is that sites sites and companies are taking these proper steps for multi-factor auth, but not a lot of us use it already. I myself, it took a while for me to even get on board with that. So that's kind of another enabler of credential abuse. And lastly, attack tool availability. I mean, now there's open source tools made just for people to abuse sites and to steal passwords. And even ones that are dedicated maybe for load testing or performance testing for something that is good, for something that is supposed to improve a website, and then turned against and used to DDoS or used for any other type of credential abuse attack. So the idea is that it is a real problem, and there are several factors that contribute to this. So how do I steal your passwords? How do I steal your username and credentials? And it ranges from a wide, list of things, a wide variety of different tools that we see out there today. Whether we're talking about phishing kits or keyloggers, any type of software or hardware in order to steal on-device data or capture any sensitive information and be able to extract that and send it back to some form of an operator. And of course, man-in-the-middle attacks. So this ranges from, if you're using a CDN or you're CDN agnostic, or you're looking at JavaScript-heavy websites, having a user have that information that's not necessarily intended for them and extracting that information and tricking that user and stealing their information in plain text. As we saw as I'm sure some of you saw in the HSTS talk earlier today, look how easy it was just to capture a password in plain text. So the threat is real, and you guys, the general population, makes it easy for an attacker like me to steal that information. So I'm stealing that information. And I just talked about how I can steal those credentials, but we also have to remember credentials can be bought, or I can acquire leaked credentials. Again, as we've seen in a lot of different headlines and companies today. So once I do that, once I steal your credentials, what do I do with them? Well, I need to verify that they're even real, they're even accurate. So going through means of account checking and making sure that I know exactly which account I'm looking at and whether I'm able to log in successfully. Now at that point, that is the credential abuse. I can hand that information off to someone else to do the dirty work, to take over the account, or I can, of course, do it myself. And once I do that, then I can successfully log into your account and become you. So I can shop, I can steal gift card information, and those are just codes typically once you log into your site. I can look at your insurance information, I can log into medical records, I can steal bank information, Bitcoin, you never know. So there's a lot of different things that I can do, but the idea is that I have essentially become you. I can do whatever I want. So that's the real struggle that we see today.
Now, as Sonia's shopping, perusing your medical records, and just generally pilfering whatever account she can, because let's say you've used them across 10, 20 different service providers, retailers, airlines, what have you, she's flying around the world on your dime. What does that cost? What does that risk look like to the business is the ultimate question. And why should anybody who is trying to battle this care? And the number one thing that anybody in security runs up against is, what is the risk? How much is it going to cost me? How much is it costing the business today? And really, what's the cost of not doing anything? So understanding the cost of a lost account, understanding the cost of each record potentially lost, looking at regulatory and compliance fines. Depending on the state you're in, if there's a breach, you are charged per record as a company. So what does that look like? Beyond that, what about brand image? Do people still want to do business with you after that? What does that look like? I guess if you're Yahoo, people are still using their services. Uber, how many people switched to Lyft? Did you care? People are slowly changing depending on what it is. Unfortunately, we're getting to the point where we're getting used to these attacks. We're getting used to our credentials getting popped. Only 5 or 6 of you about raised your hands when Sonia asked who has had a credential leak or been affected or had some sort of data element stolen. And I find that very hard to believe. And here's why. So one of the cool things about working for Akamai is that we're serving a ton of content for all the top companies around the world. So in this instance, we just took a 24-hour snapshot, and this data was provided by our threat operations team. And we were getting ready for the pre-holiday kind of data influx that we get. So we wanted to run a test run, and I was like, great, this will be awesome for Black Hat. So we looked at 45 different sites over a 24-hour period. This was across all verticals, all industries. And this was cool because we were able to actually track and look at 420 different distinct botnets. Now, we're going to stop there. I'm not going to go much further. We didn't get into attribution or start comparing them or see who was what and where. But from a bot herder perspective, we saw 420 different botnets operating against all of these customers. Now, the cool thing was we saw 34 million different accounts over a 24-hour period. That is a ton of accounts. Now, that's all fine and dandy, and those numbers are awesome, and wow, but what does that mean? When we look at it, and as you can see with the total number of logins, when you have 66% of the total logins coming across all of those customers and all of those different brands that are malicious. So 66% of the logins across all those are bad. So what does that mean? How do we find that if we're the good guy, if we're trying to recover and protect our brand and protect our customers? So that's when we start looking at the landscape. Where did we start? So everybody who's battled credential abuse started in the whack-a-mole days. You were looking at where bots are coming from, how fast they're coming in. Then you start looking at how they're built out at a layer 7 perspective. What does the HTTP headers look like? Then you start looking at, okay, they can spoof that. That's easily done. Now, can I inject some JavaScript and make them execute challenges? Does that challenge match against how they're portraying themselves, yes or no? Pretty soon, you can spoof that as well. So now what? Now you have to start understanding how the attackers are actually automating these attacks and how they're interacting specifically with the website. And we'll get kind of through all of these different elements a little bit deeper as we kind of go through this presentation.
So let's take a step back for a second. So Brent mentioned that we've evolved in terms of our detection strategies, right? So we started from I started from attacking at thousands of requests from a single IP and moving to a much lower velocity attack over a distributed set of IPs. So how did I get there? How did I alter my attack strategy, and how did Brent come back and alter his detection and mitigation strategy? So first of all, I go easy, right? So Brent has a site up and it's completely naked. It doesn't have any security controls in place. So really easy to attack. I'm sending 10,000 maybe requests per hour, per minute, per second, anything really. And there's nothing he can do to stop me. So what does he do? He applies rate detection policies. So he controls the monitors and controls the rate at which the requests occur from a single IP. And he can do this from any kind of point in the workflow. So whether he's leveraging a CDN, he can do it from the end user to the CDN, or a CDN to origin. He can create multiple groupings of how this rate detection takes place. Anything from the request signature, he can say, hey, she's submitting way too many GET requests, but not as many POST requests. So let's change the thresholds on that. That's the idea behind rate detection. So what do I need to do? I need to think of something smarter. So I need to think on a wider scale, on a broader scale. Instead of attacking from a single IP, I need to look for multiple IPs. I need to fly below the radar in terms of his rate detection thresholds. So if I'm attacking like with 10,000 requests, let's say, I'm going to break that up maybe into 1,000 each if it falls below the threshold, and then attack from maybe 10 different IPs. And so I'm good to go, right? First of all, I can impersonate a browser. I can replay the sessions. I have full control over what I can do because now I'm doing it over a huge set of IPs. Something that he's not aware of. So what does he do? He starts tracking my sessions. And now there are thresholds with that session tracking. And the difference here is that not only are there thresholds, but he's gotten more evolved in his detection strategies. So what identifies a session? How is he looking at what my browser or what my curl request is doing? It's really anything from the request header, any information. So whether it's user agent, am I rotating through user agents? Am I using different types of cookies? He knows, but I don't know what he's looking for. So if he uses session tracking, then he's making it much harder for me to execute as many requests as I am on each single IP from that distributed set. So what do I have to do? Well, I need to go for a lower velocity attack. I need to run maybe a few requests per minute, per hour, or even per day. And that's something that we've seen in the past too, over maybe an hour to 5 requests, which could seem like good user traffic. So I need to run this data over a longer period of time so that he can't detect what I'm doing. I can rotate again. I can change what identifies a session. So what does Brent do? He implements a sliding window mechanism. So this takes a single snapshot kind of in time. And this is something that he can control. So it can be dynamic or it can be something static. So let's say he's looking at maybe a 1 or 2 hour time period every so often and penalizes me for a lower velocity attack when he sees a session signature that he's looking for. And again, I don't know what that signature is. At this point, we've hit so many different types of signatures that he's creating, it gets a lot harder for me. So he implements a sliding window mechanism, and I don't know what else to do.
So we've talked a lot about rate. We've talked about how we have to change rate, and as I'm seeing things come in and the attacker starts blending further and further into my logs, and I can't really pick it out. So then I have to start diving a little bit deeper, and I have to start looking at actual headers. What does an attacker try and do as they're using these different tools like Selenium or Sentry MBA? They're able to cycle through different elements within that within the headers. So if it's user agent string, things that don't match up, like if they're missing half of a cache control header, or maybe their accept language headers are weird, or whatever that anomaly is, we can start tracking that. And that's helpful because as we see these deviations within the headers, we're able to quickly detect them and apply mitigation or management as we see fit. But what next? Of course, she figures it out and she starts submitting proper headers. She knows exactly how she should look. She's used real human traffic. She's understood, and she's moved on to the next bit. And I've lost her again. I don't have signal. So then I can start talking about proper workflow within my application. If somebody is directly posting to my login endpoint, that doesn't quite make sense depending on most business use cases. If I'm shopping for plane tickets, I'm probably going to do a fare search first before I start logging in or before I start doing a checkout. If I'm shopping on some e-commerce site, I'm probably going to go check out those jeans or those shoes or that shirt first, add it to cart, and then when I'm ready, I'm going to log in. So we're going to look for referrals, and we're going to enforce that. If you don't have a referral, or you haven't performed a GET request before you're trying to perform a POST request, that's something we can throw you out for. So then we've talked about behavioral detection. So this takes it the step further. We're going to start actively interrogating the client. We are going to execute JavaScript on the client side for data collection, and we're going to start looking at different browser plugins. We're going to do browser challenges. We're going to set cookies, and we're going to track those sessions maybe with short and long-term cookies to see kind of how their behavior is over a short sliding window and then a long sliding window. Maybe we're going to start tracking the coordinates on their mouse movements. We're going to start tracking the keyboard strokes. If you think about things that you input into a website when you are typing, whether that's a credit card number, 16 digits. Most of us have our credit card numbers mostly memorized, and you can type it at a pretty decent cadence. But that cadence still has flaws in it because we're human. You're not going to hit a key every half a second or every half millisecond or every 10 seconds. Sometimes it's a hunt and peck method, especially with those types of values. Now, your password you might type a little bit smoother, but still the cadence deviates enough so we're able to then throw that out and understand the difference between a bot automated submission and what that looks like from an overall perspective. Now, we've done these detections, we've morphed as Sonia morphs, we've evolved, and we've continued to pick up the signal as she tries to evade us. But then what do? We have some options. We can start slowing Sonia down. We talked about rate controls. Maybe we even start messing around a little bit with the actual connection itself. So when she submits a request to our site, maybe we hold on to that session and we don't send a TCP FIN, but we're not going to respond to it at all. We're done. And we're just going to let her continue to build up and run out and essentially run her sessions out on her machines. Also, we can flat out access deny 403 her. We're done. Problem is she'll probably have an exit for that as soon as that code throws, and then she knows we've caught her. So then maybe we start sending her to a honeypot. She won't know any different. We give her a fake site that looks like a login or maybe looks like a gift card page, and we just let her submit all day long because we've picked up her signature, and now we can send her the other way.
So what I talked about was an attack strategy, right? So I took different paths, and each turn I took, Brent came back and detected and mitigated my attack. But let's take a step back to, what I mentioned in the beginning. Credential abuse, it happens based off of, there are different problems with it, and there are different reasons for it. First of all, yes, they can be stolen. But the other two, credentials that can be leaked or they can be bought. So leaked and bought, those are harder because we're relying on that third-party service, that company, to be able to handle that for us. But the fact that I stole the passwords, I stole the information, the users, can make it harder for me to do something like that by enabling certain protections. And we also want to remember that passwords, they are not like your lucky underwear, and you do not share them with your friends. So just a funny little spin on it to keep in mind that passwords, you don't just put them everywhere. You use proper storage devices. You change them up every so often. You make sure they're not weak passwords. You make them complicated and complex. Make it harder for someone like me to be able to steal them and then essentially become you. So look at different login policies, look at everything out there, and make sure that it's not easy for someone like me, a real actor, a bad actor, to be able to steal that information and essentially become you. Become the good traffic, so that any detection strategy or mitigation strategy Brent put in place is impossible for me to look like. So that's just some of the takeaways that we want to go over. But we also want to make sure that you guys are up to date in the future, because again, it's constantly evolving. We're seeing that it's becoming more and more of a problem. And as we see an increase in mobile traffic today, that's only just the start of it. I mentioned IoT devices are on the rise. How many people have an Alexa or Google Home? How many people? Anyone? Only a few. I expected more hands. So that is on the rise. I'm seeing it a lot more in homes today, and now there's more vulnerabilities with being able to hack that and then buy things, using Alexa or Google, and seeing that in the future and seeing what these devices are capable of. We need to make sure we're constantly aware, because sure, now we're protecting our web applications because, again, that's still the most common traffic we see today. But with this growth in API IoT traffic, that's just another turn I'm going to take. That's another turn an attacker is going to take. You have a web endpoint, but now you have other endpoints for an attacker to look at. So that is something to keep in mind. And with native applications also on the rise, it makes it harder to use JavaScript or cookie-based detection strategies. So we need to be smarter about how we prevent someone like me, a bad actor, to be able to steal those credentials and validate that it is real good user traffic. And then AI and machine learning. That one's, that one's very new, because in the past we've always relied on having people behind these detection and mitigation strategies, turning some types of thresholds to having sometimes, tweaks and nods, but we want to move towards a self-learning system to be able to feed that information back and learn from it. So look at the attack traffic, learn the patterns of this behavior. Like Brent mentioned with the behavioral detection, learn the pattern and then not have to rely on people, rely on the technology itself. So these are just a few things to keep in mind and something to take your program, take your application and site infrastructure to the next level.
As we heard this morning on kind of the pre-keynote from Cylance, humans have bias. So really employing our AI and machine learning will be very important to understand that we have the right data sets at hand. If anybody made the H2 talk just prior to this one, understanding how H2 will affect bots. Once that landscape starts to grow and evolve, what is that going to look like for us? What does that fingerprint look like and how do we track it? And how do we actually deploy it and actually operationalize the data that we have in front of us? Questions, comments? Thank you all. We appreciate it.
I think we have 2 questions right there.
She's coming.
Can you guys raise your hands again? Thank you.
For a million years, it has been best practice that you should change your password every now and then. Common practice that it should be changed every 30 days or 90 days or something like that. A number of years ago, I attended a session where some people, they had analyzed the abuse of lead credentials. And their conclusion was that the maximum rate of abuse was obtained about 24 hours after the leaking. And after 48 hours, it more or less stopped, which means, in my opinion, that changing your password every 30 days is absolutely nonsense. If it should have any sense, it should be something like 2 hours or 4 hours or something like that, which for practical purposes means one-time passwords.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Do you have any knowledge from recent research about the time nowadays for the rate of abuse of lead credentials?
As for the life of a credential and how long that's actually going to last, I definitely agree. We talked about multi-factor authentication and not using just that single factor because, like you said, the password is going to be used up and gone quite quickly. As for any data points that would be kind of what that life looks like today, I would definitely defer you off to our threat ops team. We have one of our guys floating around here. I do not have that data point available for actually the life of how quickly that would go. As it stands, we see an attack and it's operationalized, sold, and moved, or the fraud is committed usually within less than a day.
Hello. You were mentioning about typing behaviors for passwords, and I was wondering, password managers where they auto-type the password or somebody copy and pastes it in, does that cause like false positives or incorrect?
It totally can, and that's something you have to take in account when you're looking at different behaviors of automation. Understanding the browser and how it actually interacts when you're looking at posts and whatnot is definitely very important to keep in mind as you set different thresholds or you're analyzing the data. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.